12 boys sleep tightly on a large bed in a dark, narrow room. One boy kicks the next, causing a chain reaction of sleepy kicks down the bed. Saul wakes, rubbing his bruised knee and pressing an old wound on his forehead. Saul dresses quickly and leaves the dormitory into a long, dimly lit hallway. Saul steps into a curved hallway lined with doors and dim candlelight sconces. A small hardcover book floats near Saul's left shoulder, glowing faintly blue. Saul recalls the brutal death of his previous self and his grim duties here. Saul loads a mop, bucket, and trash bin onto a cart etched with silence runes. Saul hears crying behind a door on the 11th floor as candlelight flickers oddly. Saul cleans the 12th floor, picking up strange trash thrown outside an apprentice's door. A door creaks open slightly behind Saul, its interior pitch black and silent. Saul forces himself to continue cleaning despite a rising chill of fear inside him. He reaches the 13th floor, a place filled with eerie superstition and tension. Suddenly, a thick pool of bright red blood seeps from beneath a door. The floating book suddenly opens and displays a warning just as Saul freezes. The book reveals the blood is Saul's and warns of certain death if he hesitates. Saul's fear grows as the book warns of coming death and grim consequences. Despite his fear, Saul chooses to avoid cleaning the blood, risking the butler's wrath. The book warns Saul of severe punishment and a stinky fate awaiting him tomorrow. Saul's despair deepens as he realizes his dead-end fate in this hostile tower. Saul stands frozen, time slipping as candlelight deepens to amber. Saul knows dawn is near, but he must clean the blood or face death. He can't ask others. No one nearby can face this mysterious threat. Butler won't appear tonight. Saul's options are locked to certain floors. Saul's fingers steady. He places the mop down and prepares to knock. The door creaks open slowly, revealing a tall woman with only half a head. Saul pleads for help. The woman asks why she should assist him. She offers an experiment for credits if Saul volunteers to help. Saul enters the large room with glowing oil lamps and strange tools on tables. She instructs Saul to put his hand in the bubbling black cauldron. Saul plunges his hand in, feeling a bone, deep cold that causes teeth to chatter. His hand turns into bare bone, yet he can still move the skeletal fingers. She adds ingredients to the cauldron, then asks Saul to test with his right hand. Saul plunges his right hand into the liquid, feeling an even colder numbness. This time, Saul's hand remains flesh but turns pale and smooth, not painful. The woman praises Saul and applauds, clearly amused and impressed. She retrieves a crystal vial and offers Saul a healing potion to drink. She laughs, assuring him the potion is not an experiment but healing. Saul's hope wavers as the eerie night experiment ends with healing promise. Saul tries to take the potion, but his hands are stiff and bone. The potion revives sensation in Saul's hands, but left remains skeletal. The woman offers Saul a test to become a wizard's apprentice. Saul accepts the dangerous test to become a wizard's apprentice. The woman warns Saul about the grim fate of most apprentices. The woman reveals Saul's chance to join the new apprentice cohort. Saul thanks her and learns to choose mentor cause if he succeeds. Saul exits. The blood stain on the floor mysteriously vanishes. Saul cleans the hallway rapidly before the stewards arrive for inspection. Though his left hand feels numb, Saul can move it and squeeze objects hard. Saul admires the strength in his enhanced right hand after the potion's effects. His desire to become a wizard's apprentice deepens with his newfound power. Saul overhears cruel servants mocking him while standing outside the bedroom door. The servants argue over who must do dreaded early morning hallway cleaning. Saul bursts into the room declaring the hallway cleaning will rotate again. Brown, the strongest servant, attacks Saul with a punch to enforce his rule. Saul blocks the punch with an iron grip, surprising everyone with his strength. Saul crushes Brown's fist, forcing him to collapse in agony on the floor. Boys stare in shock as Saul's left hand shatters a wooden stool. Brown groans, staring at Saul's left hand and backing away in horror. Saul exposes his left hand to frighten the servant boys into backing off. Saul declares he won't clean the corridor, assigning Brown as first in line. Brown screams in terror and crawls away from Saul's skeletal left hand. Saul orders the boys to rotate hallway cleaning duty starting tomorrow. The steward arrives and calls Saul to the storage room for questioning. Saul explains aiding Lady Kongsha in a dangerous live experiment. The steward warns Saul about unpaid work and compensation rules. Saul refuses compensation, stating no need to discuss it with Lady Kongsha. The steward lets Saul rest a few days, eyeing his skeletal hand nervously. Saul enjoys free days with no orders and finally hot meals and occasional meat. The steward brings Saul a healing potion for a head injury, but Saul feels skeptical. Saul notes the respect he gains from others by association with Lady Kongsha. Steward returns with a corpse, the boy's head transformed into fire, like flower petals. Saul sees wizard apprentices passing by, none noticing their servant clean up chores. Saul glimpses Lady Kongsha's hooded figure, but she ignores him completely. The steward tells Saul to resume duties after rest, but Saul agrees too quickly. The butler arrives, ignoring the steward, and commands Saul to follow him. Saul silently follows the butler to the 6th floor, nodding respectfully to the steward. The 6th floor hallway is packed with new wizard apprentices, pale and uneasy. Saul approaches the line's end and stares back fiercely at an annoyed apprentice. Saul accepts this harsh world will only respect strength, not kindness. Saul faces the line moving forward, coldly memorizing a boy's glare. Up ahead, 2 people sit behind a table with strange objects for testing. A fat boy bribes an annoyed apprentice, hoping to pass easily. The apprentice flicks his thumb and the boy melts into a puddle of liquid. Mysterious floating book suddenly opens before Saul's eyes, revealing harsh truths. The book reveals Saul's past failure and sarcastic warnings about his chance. The book tells how Saul used Kongsha's name to survive Sid's assassination attempt. Saul struggles with fear, knowing quitting means certain death ahead. He studies the testing devices closely, looking for a way to pass the trial. The magical orb tests aptitude by turning transparent when pressed on the forehead. Next, the carved wooden doll tests mental strength by moving in response. Finally, a paintbrush dipped in paint assesses elemental affinity with a circle. Saul watches other candidates pass by bribing but looking drained and pale. Saul's turn comes and he faces Sid with fear, who mocks his presence. Saul disobeys, grabs the paintbrush first, and draws a trembling black circle. Black circle slowly shifts colors in a chaotic spectrum, shocking Sid. Sid mocks Saul for claiming dark and light opposing elements, laughing loud. Saul stares into the wooden doll's hollow eyes, hearing mysterious whispers. Whispers grow urgent, shifting from help to kill, dizzying Saul's mind. Sid orders Saul to stop, furious and standing with twisted, angry face. Saul suddenly collapses fainting, eyes rolling back after the mental strain. Saul awakens suddenly, gasping for air in his small bedroom. George serves Saul soup patiently, worried about his recovery. Saul inquires about the time and his unconscious duration. Saul realizes he is in a private room as relief floods him. George congratulates Saul on passing the test with a shy smile. George reveals his offer to be Saul's personal servant. George shares information about Brown's renewed bullying tactics. Saul orders caution and forbids George from acting prematurely. George pledges loyalty and readiness to serve Saul unquestioningly. Saul explores his small room, finding blank scrolls and a pen to study. Saul feels his future bright despite his low magical aptitude. Someone knocks, and Saul opens the door, adjusting his expression. Kelly greets Saul coldly, expressing cautious friendliness from next door. Kelly shares her reasons for approaching Saul despite her cold tone. Saul is struck by Kelly's mention of those who failed dying in the test. Kelly notes Saul's strong will to rise from servant to apprentice. Kelly ends, stating her hope for alliance based on their talents. Saul listens as a man orders first-rank apprentices to gather for class. New apprentices gather nervously, hopeful to begin their training journey together. The East Tower corridor reveals strange glowing symbols that confuse and unsettle Saul. 2 young apprentices collapse suddenly, overcome by the corridor's mysterious magic. Saul and Kelly enter a classroom where the first class and rules of the tower will be taught. Mentor Goodo loudly introduces the rules while violently vomiting a splash of green slime. Mentor Goodo sternly warns apprentices about the harsh assessment and grim consequences. Saul scribbles notes in shorthand, trying to keep pace with the rapid lecture flow. Saul quietly reveals to Kelly his injured left hand, breaking his concentration briefly. Kelly frowns deeply, puzzled as Saul explains his hand was injured recently. The classroom door opens as a young man enters carrying mentor registration forms. The young man explains the rules and mentor form distribution with a strict tone. The class falls silent as Mentor Goodo's return is announced and awaited. Young man steps down to hand out forms but notices something grim underfoot. Whispers spread quietly that Mentor Goodo has returned, unsettling the classroom. The tired apprentice Lakai finally stands and speaks to the silent classroom. Lakai announces his name and tells apprentices to collect handbooks themselves. Lakai casts a quick spell, removing the mess on the floor without speaking. Doze and Rocky offer Saul and Kelly support, inviting them to study together. together. Saul examines the mentor list, focusing on Kaz's dark and death-related specialties. Kelly frowns, frustrated there's no fire element mentor for her strongest affinity. Kai patiently answers apprentice questions about mentor selection and rules. Saul notices Duke glaring at him once again during Lakai's lesson. Kelly explains Duke's tragic past and the cruelty of a third-rank apprentice. Lakai wraps up the lesson reminding apprentices about basics and tests. Lakai introduces mentor ends, emphasizing his flexible teaching across elements. Doe suggests picking mentor ends together, but Saul and Kelly refuse firmly. Saul reflects silently on his frailty and uncertain chance of survival in this world. Lakai collects the forms as Saul and Kelly decide to hand theirs in themselves. Kelly courageously selects mentor Gudo despite his earlier grim display. Lakai dismisses the class, promising supplies will be sent to their dormitories. After the room empties, Lakai suddenly chuckles quietly to himself alone. Saul returns to his dorm and faces Sid, the sneering second-rank apprentice. Sid mocks Saul's cheating but promises not to revoke his qualification. Sid gleefully predicts Saul's death and threatens to display his corpse. Sid leaves after mocking Saul, who exhales with stiff limbs loosening. Duke blocks Saul's doorway and insults him with venomous rage. Saul's left skeletal hand clamps down fiercely on Duke's head, crushing him. Kelly appears and waves the apprentice rulebook, stopping Saul's attack. Saul agrees to kill Duke later in private, voices resolute determination. Inside the dorm, Kelly inspects Saul's room, asking about his missing belongings. Kelly suggests Saul faked weakness and notes his poor magical aptitude. Kelly compliments Saul's mental aptitude and introduces herself as top scorer. The two shake hands, marking a new and mysterious friendship between them. Saul sits at his desk alone, reflecting on recent tense moments and friends. Saul writes down names of enemies and uncertain allies, deep in thought. A knock on the door interrupts Saul's thoughts. He hides the crumpled paper. A beautiful young maid appears, offering to help Saul with his supplies. Saul politely declines help and thanks the maid, who bows deeply. Saul slams the door, blocking the maid and showing his determination clearly. Another maid notices the blocked delivery and questions the young maid outside. Saul studies each thick book carefully, diving into layered magical knowledge. He inspects magical tools and badges, confirming every item carefully. He studies a Noah script book, preparing for his first difficult lesson. He watches the blue hourglass, marking time quietly through the silent night. He eats dinner while reviewing notes, barely noticing the hours pass by. At midnight, Saul stretches but feels mentally sharp without fatigue. He notices better stamina since passing the aptitude test and smiles. He dims the candlelight, knowing survival depends on this simple rule. Saul lies on his bed, stretched out, feeling the comfort of his new space. Curls in a blanket ball, finding an unexpected comfort before sleep. His eyes snap open at 4:15 a.m. as his body follows a strict natural rhythm. He peers out the door quietly, watching Brown struggling with a heavy cart. Saul recalls Brown's bullying and assumes harsher duties await him now. He touches the phantom book, realizing only real wizardry unveils its secrets. Kelly arrives quietly, suggesting they compare notes before class starts soon. They walk fast down the corridor, discussing study hours and stamina quietly. Kelly admits low stamina while Saul hides his unusually long reading hours. Kelly envied Saul's endurance after hearing he read for hours without breaks. They reach the packed classroom. Spots are scarce except at front and back. Kelly urges Saul to stop hiding and join her up front in the classroom. Saul attends his first wizard script class taught by a disinterested apprentice. The apprentice mocks the weak students who feel dizzy looking at scripts. The teacher demands payment for questions, mocking their lack of money. Kelly wonders about the insult, while a senior apprentice explains its meaning. Doze warns Kelly to stay away from Saul and the second-rank apprentice's threat. Saul ignores Doze's warning and leaves without looking back. Doze complains about being ignored while Rocky advises caution around Saul. Saul arrives early for meditation class carrying a crystal ball cautiously. A new apprentice quietly moves away when Saul sits beside them. Kelly sits next to Saul and shares her discovery that crystals are overpriced. Saul asks if Kelly has crystals, and she says she bought some with pocket money. Class begins late. Older students quietly meditate as new ones whisper doubts. Saul struggles reading chaotic meditation illustrations that make his head spin. Saul notices footsteps and looks up to see a tall blonde woman walking in. The woman releases a strange lizard, crocodile creature and addresses the class. Saul learns this is meditation class and the instructor warns against metal items. Lightning flashes on her face, leaving a scar she calmly peels away. The scorched skin is dropped and eaten by the lizard, like creature silently. Saul wonders if becoming a wizard means becoming a monster inside and out. Monica holds a crystal ball to teach meditation to her class. Monica explains meditation's power and mental clarity benefits. Saul flips through dizzying meditation diagrams, feeling nausea. Saul studies a walking figure diagram, noticing subtle posture changes. Saul traces the diagram backward, feeling chills at the monster figure. Saul collapses, but Monica catches him before he falls to the floor. Monica chides the class as Saul mutters thanks tearily. Monica praises Saul's mental strength and urges him to meditate. Saul meditates successfully, absorbing glowing elemental orbs mindfully. Monica walks the room, advising students on meditation and crystal balls. Saul remains meditating after class. Monica orders Kelly away. Monica awakens Saul with a spark of electricity on his forehead. Monica explains elemental perceptions linked to mental strength. Monica demonstrates elemental perceptions using colored stones and sheets. Saul comprehends the blue stone's visibility on the tri-colored sheet. Monica leaves the small skin-eating monster on the ground and exits. Saul walks across the empty classroom, deep in confused thought. Saul suddenly recalls he did not sense many dark elements in meditation. He realizes his strongest elemental sense is not for darkness. Saul returns to his dorm, exhausted and confused after the test results. He meditates with his crystal ball, trying to sense the dark elemental energy again. He notices dark elements are scarce, unlike during testing when he felt strongest. He suspects the healing potion Kongsha gave might have altered his elemental affinity. Saul exhales deeply, feeling the weight of his uncertain situation as class nears. He leaves the dorm alone, missing Kelly and his chance to ask about meditation. Saul arrives at Kaz's lab on the 15th floor and spots Duke's glaring eyes. Second rank apprentice tells them Kaz won't arrive until later this afternoon. They settle down to study separately, the room divided by silent tension. At 3:30 p.m., Kaz arrives and cuts the second rank apprentice down sharply. Kaz demands Mark keep the lab tidy, warning him this is his next test. Kaz questions the three newcomers, glaring hardest at Saul's weak magic. Saul admits low magic but strong mental powers. Kaz is unimpressed. Kaz sets a harsh goal, 10 joules of magic in 3 months or else. Sends Duke and Angela away, leaving Saul with Mark for cleanup duty. Saul offers to help with cleaning. Mark agrees but warns about hard work. Mark explains Saul's tasks and emphasizes final cleaning responsibility. Saul starts cleaning, showing skill from past manual work experience. Mark cheers Saul for diligence and shares valuable study tips during cleaning. 2 hours pass as Mark finishes work and gives Saul the final cleanup tasks. Mark tells Saul to use the yellow bin for trash and warns about the deadline. Mark offers Saul 5 minutes to ask any questions before leaving for a date. Saul asks how mental power and magical power influence wizard studies. Mark uses a river analogy to describe mental and magic aptitude in spellcasting. Saul vows to make more trips to compensate for his small magical capacity. Mark warns Saul about limits of his small bowl and the need for sufficient magic. Mark shows magic construct with snapping mouths to warn Saul of dangers in the lab. Mark orders Saul not to move and reminds him they're in a lab environment. Saul asks if any body modification is possible for a first-rank apprentice. Mark says body modification requires second-rank status, a rare skill among apprentices. Mark advises Saul to study second-rank apprentice books at the library. Mark smiles, saying the library never stops juniors from reading higher-level books. Alone, Saul considers the challenge and his strengths with mental power. Mark peeks back in to remind Saul to tidy before leaving for his date. Saul starts final cleanup, putting away chairs and gathering trash carefully. Saul dumps trash into the deep yellow bin near the lab entrance carefully. Feels uneasy alone in the lab and rubs his arm nervously. He finds crumpled sketch papers covered with scribbles on the central table. As he tries to move a small trash bin, it flickers red and Saul freezes. Ignoring the warning, Saul seals the bin and continues inspecting the lab quietly. Saul finds the cabinet door slightly open with many wooden dolls inside piled up. He carefully picks up a wooden doll, feeling an eerie presence from its hollow eyes. The floating book flips pages rapidly, revealing a new note about Saul's task. Saul returns the wooden doll to the cabinet and hears a rustling sound alone. Saul hesitates, unsure whether to grab or release the puppet's finger. He tests the puppet's power by loosening his grip and breathing easier. Saul deduces the puppet needs his help to steal his body or multiples to attack. He approaches a small trash bin, declaring it trash for the puppet puppet to enter. Floating book flashes new text warning Saul about doom if he leaves the puppet in trash. Saul panics and grabs the puppet tightly, unable to break its sturdy limbs. He senses the puppet smiled at him and fears smashing it could be fatal. He considers removing the puppet safely from the lab as the book silently retreats. Suddenly, the cabinet crashes open, scattering puppets who plead urgently for help. Hundreds of voices scream in his mind as Saul tries to escape but falls hard. He struggles with wooden stiffness, numbness creeping through his body fast. He uses meditation, recalling monster walking moves to dull the deadly voices. Though numbness retreats, Saul's limbs remain stiff and struggle to move. His left hand remains flexible, allowing him to crawl inch by inch toward safety. He alternates crawling and meditating to fend off numbness during the slow crawl. Last, Saul's left hand reaches the lab door, and it opens inward freely. Mark's eerie face peers through the door, warning Saul to clean the mess. The red trash bin pops open and a pale bony hand struggles to climb out. Death flashes wildly in the floating book as Saul laughs maniacally at fate. The lab door hits Saul's forehead, silencing his laughter and stunning him. Saul notices movement and a man wrapped in pink bandages enters, silver eyes visible. The bandaged man speaks gently, questioning why Saul is spending the night in the lab. Saul realizes it is late, full mobility returns, and he feels like himself again. Saul stands weak but defiant, thanking the pink, banded man for saving him. The pink, banded man warns Saul not to be alone in the East Tower at night. With a wave, the pink, banded man sends Saul swiftly back to his dormitory hall. Saul appears outside dorm 604, cautiously scanning the silent hallway. Mark and Sid step into the West Tower corridor as midnight passes quietly. Mark declares the deal finished and refuses to interfere further with Saul. Sid reveals obsession with Saul's diary. Furious the diary saved him from death. Sid retreats to contemplate the deadly secret behind the diary of a dead wizard. Saul tries to sleep, but nightmares haunt him about the lab and Senior Mark. He imagines the pink, banded man wiping monsters in a flash, nicknaming him Big Pink. Unexpected knocking wakes Saul. He nervously opens to reveal the maid in silk pink cloak. Maid slips the cloak off, revealing a carved wooden body. She screams in terror. Startled awake, Saul quickly checks the clock. Only 12:30 a.m. Relief floods him. He cautiously answers a quiet voice claiming to be Kongsha at the door. Kongsha enters, revealing her terrifying head and graceful figure to Saul. Kongsha teases Saul's struggles, mocking his elemental senses with icy smirk. She offers Saul a potion to boost his dark element perception during meditation. Saul questions possible side effects, conflicted yet curious about the potion. Kongsha warns Saul about potion dangers but offers power at a cost. Saul doubts long-term use, fearing he may lose true wizard potential. Saul firmly refuses the potion. Kongsha's gaze turns menacing then fades. Kongsha warns Saul price will worsen if he returns pleading for help. Saul trembles fearing Kongsha's threat but knows he must refuse her control. Saul lies on bed exhausted, determined to grow stronger unaided by Kongsha. Saul finds George working early. George asks to be his personal servant. Saul questions George about Brown and recent suspicious visits. George reveals he saw Sid, the blonde youth who attacked Saul with a book. Saul recalls terrifying scene, Sid hurling the same floating book at him. Saul realizes the book was not his boon but existed here before him. Saul accepts that survival means fighting those who seek to harm him. Saul tells George to return and promises to arrange safer tasks for him. Saul quickly packs and makes his way to the East Tower for class. Saul arrives late. Kelly saves him a seat and comments on his delay. Kelly warns Saul about dangers. He shows little surprise at harsh truths. Saul accepts the brutal reality. This world's dangers threaten sanity itself. Saul asks Kelly about a crazed apprentice's fate after a strange incident. Kelly explains gruesome details of the apprentice who harmed himself to Saul. Saul questions Kelly about safety, surprised by her calm acceptance of danger. Kelly remarks the harsh reality of magic world dangers bluntly to Saul. Kelly tells about Mentor Goodo's strange vomiting as Saul listens, amused and grossed out. Kelly notices Saul smiling for the first time since arriving, noting his worn look. Saul silently contemplates Kelly's blunt words about his haggard appearance. appearance. Saul studies the dry lecture, ignoring the monotone teaching and reading alone. Saul sees Doze, Rocky, and Duke whispering, with Kelly annoyed at their childish isolation. Kelly reveals class has turned to self-study, instructor ignores and reads another book. Saul cautiously asks Kelly for magic crystals to borrow books from the library. Kelly reluctantly gives Saul 5 magic crystals, with a loan contract sealing the deal. Saul attends runic construction class, disappointed by instructor's minimal teaching. Saul visualizes the first rune in his mind, stunned by its crisp clarity. Saul draws the rune on paper with special ink, concentrating on magic infusion. Saul's rune glows with magical energy, surprising Kelly with his success. Saul quickly repeats rune drawing 2 more times, each a success on start. His 4th rune attempt fails as Saul runs out of magic, his face creasing with worry. Saul breathes deeply, calming himself and recalling his resolve not to panic. He begins meditating with his crystal ball, focusing to restore magic quickly. Class notices Saul's magical aura. Duke approaches the instructor for extra lessons. Saul trains runes fastest among newcomers, though magic drains quickly. Many students fail to draw runes. Saul perseveres without arrogance. Saul tests his magical energy after class and feels hopeless at only 3 jowls. Saul climbs East Tower's slope to the 9th floor library, determined to pass. Saul finds the librarian acting terrified and silent near the library entrance. The librarian vanishes as Saul touches his shoulder. Others watch nervously. New apprentices hesitate at the eerie library entrance. Duke mocks fears. Saul emerges from library mist holding a book. Entrance guard is gone. Old man demands 2 magic crystals to borrow a book. Saul pays without protest. Saul rushes to copy the borrowed book's contents at an empty lab table. Angela and Duke enter, each keeping distance, quietly minding their own work. Mark arrives with a nervous man, scans lab and sees Saul safe inside. Mark dismisses the man, walks past Duke to talk to focus Saul quietly. Mark relieves Saul of lab duties but offers help and encourages questions. Saul explains his plan to copy the book fast. Mark takes a closer look. Mark freezes reading the book title. It's on sorceress body modification. Saul calmly admits his interest in the dangerous sorcery book he's copying. Mark sees determination in Saul's eyes and senses his hidden potential. Mark tells Saul to copy the book first and offers help if needed later. Angela shyly asks Mark for help with rune construction using a cute smile. Mark demands a fee, dashing Angela's hopes. She quickly returns to her seat. Saul focuses on copying the book, skipping less useful parts quickly. Mark helps Saul summarize key points, improving his copying speed significantly. Enter Kaz arrives frowning and brushes Duke away without a word. Duke is unsettled, glaring sideways at Saul with unease and frustration. Kaz unexpectedly signals Saul to come with him, causing Mark to tense. Saul follows Kaz down winding stairs into dim, shadowed lower tower floors. They pass respectful apprentices bowed low as they descend into eerie lower floors. Kaz leads Saul into a hallway guarded by a large, unmoving man blocking their path. Kaz opens a red wooden door creaking loudly, revealing a gruesome inside room. Saul enters a foul, smelling room full of strange writing and a dark conveyor belt. Kaz explains this floor stores bodies and offers 3 credits monthly for the work. Saul accepts the job to process mutated corpses and asks for instructions. Corpse covered by a black sheet emerges on the belt. Saul's face drains white. Saul recognizes the corpse as the apprentice with legs shredded and buried yesterday. Saul steps back, startled, as the corpse's eyes dart left without head movement. Saul asks Kaz if the twitching corpse is still alive despite its horrible state. Kaz explains the corpse's brain is dead but parts still twitch, not a soul or threat. Saul admits fear but claims he can handle the grim task before him. Kaz explains the job involves sorting mutated corpses to salvage magic materials safely. Saul must separate mutated parts for salvage and deposit the rest into a sealed box. Kaz warns Saul that 5 salvage parts a month suffice, more earn extra magic credit. Saul tries intuition, pointing to twitching eyeballs but Kaz declares them useless. Saul checks his floating book but finds no help, so focuses on intuition alone now. Saul uses mental vision to see elemental particles and spots glowing, magical parts. Kaz impatiently reveals there are 2 salvageable parts and encourages finding at least one. Saul points to the teeth. Kaz confirms these are valuable salvageable parts. Saul collects 1 glowing part, then spots another but pretends he finds only one to pass. Kaz points out a 3rd glowing spot Saul purposely left out but passes him anyway. Kaz guides Saul on dissecting and sealing the salvaged materials properly on the table. Remaining non-salvageable parts wrapped and sealed in black leather go into large box. Signals to Saul to pull the lever and the conveyor belt moves forward to the next corpse. Saul recognizes the next corpse as the maid who had delivered his materials before. Kes challenges Saul to find the maid's salvageable parts to prove he can keep this job. Saul flings back the covering and studies the maid's dissected corpse for salvageable parts. Saul secures morgue job. Kes gives him a leather robe for protection. Kes sets Saul's work schedule, forbidding any removal of corpses from morgue. Saul learns the job pays well with extra bonuses for effort and skill. Kes explains the morgue's layered corpse screening process for safety. Saul reflects on his unexpected skill in corpse picking amid risks and rewards. Kes wonders how Saul's weak dark element perception helps detect corpses' faults. Saul acknowledges his strong spiritual sensitivity, explaining his unique talent. Saul plans to ask Kelly about meditation effects and different diagram styles. Kaz's enthusiasm for teaching fades quickly, leaving Saul mostly alone. Alone, Saul hesitates, then pulls the lever to call the next corpse. Pulls the lever, but no new corpse appears on the belt's end. A distant voice tells Saul to stop. No corpses will come today. Saul learns to watch a yellow lamp that signals a corpse delivery. With no work coming, Saul leaves the morgue promptly to avoid lingering. Saul gives Kelly a credit. She brags about her mentor's study rules. Kelly explains her mentor forbids job searching, focusing only on study. Monica misses meditation class. A cold second-rank apprentice replaces her. Kelly discusses meditation diagrams with Saul, surprised by his methods. Saul flips through his meditation book, finding a strange diagram inside. Kelly closes her eyes tightly, overwhelmed by the dizzying meditation diagram. Kelly admits only Saul's mental strength can withstand the monstrous diagram. Saul wonders if someone swapped his page with a riskier diagram on purpose. He suspects Sid might have tampered with his meditation materials. A senior apprentice asks Saul where he got the rare meditation diagram. Saul and Kelly discuss the danger of the diagram as the senior insists on buying it. After class, they head to the East Tower Library's 9th floor to copy the diagram. The senior apprentice copies the diagram while Saul credits Kelly's account. The senior leaves, joking about wasting money on girls, making Kelly furious. Saul stays late to renew Grimm's book after his sudden morgue trip yesterday. Trembling older maid delivers Saul's lunch, bowing nervously as she serves. Saul suspects something's wrong with the maids after his predecessor's suspicious death. Hungry and wary, Saul resolves not to lose control to Sid or others again. He rushes to the morgue, where no corpses arrive and the lights flicker uneasily. Kaz arrives calmly, ignoring the lack of corpses and Saul's worried questions. Saul shows Kaz the human monster movement diagram from his meditation book. Kaz questions Saul's use of the dangerous erosion diagram at his rank. Saul accuses someone of tampering with his unique meditation book. Kaz warns Saul that kindness has no place in the harsh wizard world. Kaz promises to stop anyone from tampering with apprentice supplies again. Kaz walks away after advising Saul to focus on study and growth. Saul feels relief but worries about Sid's unseen attacks continuing. Saul copies books rapidly with a focused and blank expression. At 7 o'clock, Saul leaves the morgue, clutching his books. A first-rank apprentice passes without a glance. Saul quietly steps aside. Saul waits 10 minutes by the deep red door. It remains firmly closed. Kaz judges his new apprentices Duke and Angela with disappointment. Kaz reflects on Saul's talent and initial plans to eliminate him. Senses shadows writhe unnaturally along the corridor floor beneath steady light. Kaz bows deeply to the pink, bandaged tower master descending the stone slope. The tower master passes Kaz but then turns to speak with a calm voice. Discuss Saul's talent and meditation book tampering in low voices. The tower master demands strict control of apprentices and their resources. The tower master commands Kaz to find and punish the culprit swiftly. Kaz holds the silk-bound book, puzzled by the tower master's interest. Saul's unique talent attracts deep interest and danger at the tower. Senior apprentice Hayden waits for work in the cramped second morgue room. Hayden laments his tedious corpse job but must keep it to pass the monthly tests. Hayden doubts advancing to second rank is worth the endless corpse processing work. Startled by a sudden knock, Hayden nearly falls trying to answer the door. Sid announces himself as second-rank apprentice seeking the morgue job vacancy. Sid pressures Hayden to make room for his junior at the morgue job. Hayden worries about interference but offers to persuade the newbie to leave the job. Sid offers a rare midnight phantom feather as reward for removing the newbie. Hayden vows determinedly to remove the newbie and earn the rare reward. Mentor Kaz appears suddenly, interrupting their conversation with stern presence. Kaz commands Sid to gather new recruits immediately, ignoring his test schedule. Sid begs for leniency, but Kaz insists on immediate departure tonight. Kaz reminds Sid that all tower occupants belong to the master's authority absolutely. Sid silently accepts the harsh order, sweat dripping onto the cold floor. Saul learns of Sid's departure from Mentor Kaz, worry etched on his face. Kaz gives Saul a rare silk-bound guidebook to aid his corpse refining skills. Saul humbly accepts the priceless guide, chuckling at the mentor's generosity. The morgue candlelight glows bright white as Saul activates the corpse platform. Fresh corpse emerges wrapped in black leather as Saul prepares for work. He meditates deeply, using the hardback book despite its dark associations. The corpse seems to shift briefly, reminding Saul of Sid and cruel threats. He vows to remain useful and valuable to protect himself from looming danger. Saul suspects the corpse refinement art connects to wizardry body modifications. Saul throws himself into intense study across dormitory, classroom, and morgue. Kelly grows uneasy as Saul's relentless effort raises pressure on their peers. Rumors spread that Kaz demands Saul reach 10 joules of magic by the test. Testing himself secretly, Saul finds his magic power is only 3 joules, far short. Kaz demands Saul meet these standards despite his usefulness and new job. He feels watched by Kongsha and Sid, bracing for revenge and scrutiny alike. He uses mental aptitude to recover after minimal sleep and push his limits. Basic knowledge class, Saul breezes ahead, fast reading on animals and ghosts. Kelly notices Saul's quick progress, surprised he's finished the ghost section. He quietly leaves the classroom while others slack, telling Kelly he must go. Saul arrives at the lab carrying books and finds Mark studying alone inside. Mark greets Saul, noting few attend classes and some must self-study here. Saul asks for help with composite runes after skipping parts of classes. Mark warns Saul composite runes are complex and conduction changes must be learned. Under guidance, Saul realizes learning composite runes is an immense challenge. Saul knows time is short but continues pushing to master magic and spells. Mark won't waste much time teaching Saul, busy with his own studies. Saul studies mostly alone, asking Mark for help with tough magical concepts. Despite Mark's explanations, Saul struggles to link the magic concepts logically. Before noon, Saul asks to borrow the mental aptitude testing puppet. Saul admits he's afraid but needs the puppet, receiving it for 3 crystals. Saul wraps the puppet carefully in cloth and places it safely in his robe pocket. Saul hears a strange whisper but Mark stays focused on his research. Saul walks out of the lab clutching his books and the wrapped puppet inside his robe. A shy female apprentice stops Saul to share a message, but he rushes away. Doze blocks Saul's path with news about a mutual aid study group today. Saul declines the aid society invitation, explaining he has no money to join. After lunch, Saul reaches the morgue he uses as his private study space. His study cache includes mutated corpse materials and supplies he obtained. Saul learns corpse materials decay unless stored in special containers or spellbound. He strives to master a dark compound rune needed for organ preservation spell. Saul confirms his rune drawings are correct but they refuse to activate. He experiments with perspective and proportionality but still fails to activate. Frustrated, he crumples his paper and wonders where he misunderstood the rune. Then he realizes the 2 runes planes might not be parallel, a new insight. Saul confirms the intersecting planes form the compound rune's true shape. He visualizes the rune for an hour, reconstructing it perfectly in his mind. He suddenly opens his eyes, excited after mastering the compound rune structure. Suddenly exhausted, Saul doubts his magic aptitude while feeling drained. He calms himself and decides he wasted magic trying for the first time. His depleted magic forces him to meditate using a crystal ball for restoration. Sudden candle flicker disrupts his focus. He sighs at the new task ahead. More guests arrive on the conveyor belt for study. He readies his tools. He calls corpses guests to ease his discomfort during grim work. He finds faint glowing particles in the remains and takes samples carefully. Saul stores collected crystals carefully and dumps waste into sealed container. Next guest is a child, but Saul quickly suspects a magical disguise. He confirms adult bone structure despite child's outward appearance. Saul understands the transformed apprentice's altered magical state. Third guest shows battle wounds and skull skull damage from weapons. Saul glances at the time. The transmission flame still burns steady. At 6:30 p.m., Saul knows time is short. He must quicken his checks. Last guest is a plump woman with thin glowing cracks on her skin. Saul tests the white crystals, which repel the translucent tongues instantly. The crystal burns with green smoke and destroys the tongue within the crack. After waiting, Saul cuts open the crack and extracts a flesh lump safely. Saul concludes the crystals cause exorcism, converting tongues to flesh lumps. At 7:30 p.m. the flame dims. Saul packs books and hurries to leave. A shadow almost causes collision. Saul apologizes and turns back. Gray-haired man asks Saul if he is senior apprentice of the morgue. The senior notices the rune diagram Saul clutches and points at his hand. Saul clutches the blueprint, unknowingly revealing it to a lurking second-rank apprentice. The silent apprentice follows Saul closely like a ghost, unseen and unchallenged. Saul returns to bustling dorm halls where apprentices relax after exhausting day's work. Kelly confronts Saul about missing the Mutual Aid Society meeting tonight. Saul admits he forgot the meeting, distracted by his difficult studies today. Nearby, Doze and another girl laugh quietly, unsettling the dormitory's calm mood. Sudden strange laughter spreads through the hall, making Saul nervous about Kelly. Kelly starts laughing unnaturally, alarming Saul, who grabs her abruptly. Saul pulls Kelly inside his room as the strange apprentice silently slips in behind. Byron lowers his head. His mouth stretches out toward Kelly's head in a strange way. Saul warns Byron, but the senior insists, his mouth pressed to Kelly's head firmly. A bulge moves from Kelly's scalp down Byron's mouth, withdrawing something unseen. Byron retracts his mouth. Kelly stands disturbed, two tiny wounds visible on her scalp. Kelly regains composure, thanking Byron while Saul remains wary and cautious. Byron ignores thanks, nodding at Saul and accepting the blueprint without hesitation. Saul briefly explains the coordinate axis theory to Byron and curious Kelly at the table. After silence, Byron stretches his mouth wide and pulls out a small notebook unexpectedly. The cover reads Byron's study notes as Saul confirms the strange senior's name. Byron warns Saul not to meddle with the Mutual Aid Society's parasite, healing rapidly. Byron silently takes Saul's drafts and leaves the dormitory after nodding. Kelly stares quietly at the empty tabletop after Saul's runic magic explanation. Suddenly, Kelly bursts out, grabs her magical items, and slams the door shut. She returns swiftly, slamming the door and placing valuable magical goods on the table. Kelly gifts her magic crystals and valuable items to Saul, asking him to explain again. Saul counts stolen crystals from Kelly's money pouch, feeling slightly guilty. Kelly shows Saul her original zero-tier fire spellbook with practice notes inside. She explains the spellbook holds difficult fire runes needing composite spell mastery. Kelly presents a magical grenade called Iron and Fire with careful instructions. Kelly admits she only taught Saul the method, offering her material belongings instead. Saul silently appreciates Kelly's help as the hallways grow empty and quiet. Memories of his old life flash, contrasting with the deadly dangers in this world. Saul masters the dark element runes, earning his first free zero-tier spell from Kaz. Kaz coldly hints Saul needs basics down before learning more spells from him. Saul focuses on training his mental power through the whispering puppet doll's influence. Saul cuts connection hastily whenever the puppet's desperate whispered pleas grow intense. He settles, growing stronger is the way to overcome the strange and eerie dangers. He studies the decomposition spell, theorizing its scientific principle carefully. Saul prepares 3 fresh organs on the table to practice the spell gestures precisely. His first spell casting fails, he focuses and collects himself to try again. Saul meditates to restore magic with crystal ball before succeeding with organ preservation. Success. Organ preservation spell reaches proficiency +1 after hard effort and focus. A month passes. Apprentices remain secluded, pale from no sunlight. Saul works obsessively in the morgue, his face deathly pale and tired. Saul leaves the morgue reluctantly after hitting a dead end researching magic. Saul recalls how the book on body modification lacks detailed procedures. Saul arrives at the laboratory containing Mark and Angela. Duke is absent. Mark greets Saul warmly and asks if he has magic credits to discuss. Angela quietly leaves the lab at Mark's direction, closing the door behind. Mark warns Saul that body modification is risky and for higher ranks. Saul explains his low magic power and urgent need for body modification. Mark offers Saul 2 magic credits and a half-hour knowledge advance. Mark discusses corpse materials and safety precautions for modification. Mark warns Saul about ghosts attracted by corpse-based modifications. Saul vows to grow stronger, showing his skeletal hand defiantly. Mark delivers a grim warning about fear and the unknown's endless horror. Mark recommends skin and bone for safer body modification runes engraving. Mark reveals his own body modification, a long crimson tongue slithering from hand. Saul leaves after 30 minutes, while Mark reflects deeply on him. Saul ignores fear and hesitation, eager to test his new knowledge in the morgue. A hooded woman brushes past Saul, signaling silently with a raised finger. Saul recognizes Kongsha, recalling her persistence after rejection last month. Saul changes mood, expecting Kongsha's next move after holding out for weeks. Saul enters the third morgue, shuts the door carefully, and sighs in relief. Saul plans to soften tone with Kongsha, unsure if she will threaten or coax him. Waits for Sid's return and admits his rejection of Kongsha was tactical. Saul tidies books, decides not to start his body modification today, and reads instead. The transfer platform lights ignite as a new corpse arrives, clean and peaceful. Saul finds no wounds on the corpse and wonders about its strange condition. Corpse suddenly opens its eyes, startling Saul into shock and surprise. Saul tries to close the corpse's eyelids, but the eyes stubbornly open again. The corpse speaks calmly, requesting Saul not to block its sight or damage its body. The corpse warns Saul about appearances and pleads not to damage its body. Saul notes the strange packet in his pocket as the floating book suddenly flips open. Saul contemplates discarding the strange item as the floating book records his action. Saul raises a bone cleaver and approaches the twitching corpse cautiously nearby. Saul sprinkles crushed crystal dust on the body, calming its twitching limbs instantly. Corpse pleads it's not what Saul fears and claims it can come back to life. The book closes quietly as Saul exhales and raises the cleaver once again. Saul eyes the flesh lump on the teleport platform. No holy light now. Saul senses a gaze and turns sharply toward the teleport entrance. Saul, bone cleaver in hand, steps toward the teleport entrance. Saul lifts the black tassels and spots Hayden retreating inside the passage. Saul jokes with small frame, asks Hayden to help lift the heavy corpse. Saul drops the cleaver loudly and laughs, telling Hayden to retreat. Hayden retreats nervously as Saul watches coldly at the doorway. Saul lets the tassels fall. The dim candlelight returns above the entrance. Saul cleans the bone cleaver, scraping off flesh chunks on conveyor belt. Floating book speaks cryptic words. Saul's mind puzzles over the message. Saul carefully places the eyeball in a box and seals it quietly. Saul stands, excitement rising over a possible new item and book upgrade. Saul unlocks the red door at the corridor's end, preparing to knock. The door opens slightly. Hayden appears, blocking the room behind him. Saul introduces himself as an apprentice and asks about the strange corpse. Hayden admits the corpse seemed strange but saw no special value. Saul smiles stiffly, relying on Hayden from now on as they part ways. Hayden mutters darkly, uneasy about Saul but feeling cautious. Saul sets down his cleaver in shadows, ready for Senior Byron's meeting. Saul knocks on Byron's crimson door, and a woman answers in his place. The woman says Byron will leave the tower soon, packing up his things. Saul is surprised, learning one must leave the tower at a certain age. He learns 30 is the cutoff age for third-rank apprentices in the tower. Saul blocks the door, questioning the woman about the strange body at morgue. She coldly mocks Saul, pushing the door, refusing to discuss her part further. Saul stands outside the door, contemplating his role in the aftermath. He recalls morgue steps, first for exorcism, then material gathering, then cleanup. Saul decides not to rely on others' kindness but to grow stronger himself. He retrieves his bone cleaver and resolves to pass his tests to survive longer. He realizes he has 18 years to become third rank before the tower rejects him. 7 p.m. The hourglass runs out. Saul waits anxiously for Kongsha's arrival. At 1 a.m., Kongsha appears hooded, entering Saul's dorm with a seductive air. Kongsha chuckles, asking how much mana Saul currently has, easing tension. Kongsha reveals Saul has 2 months left and doubts his magic growth. Saul begs Kongsha for help, surrendering hope but seeking her mercy. Kongsha offers a deal, potions to survive and rise if Saul obeys her commands. Potion boosts meditation, raising Saul's magic close to the test requirement. Saul secretly learns the potion's true name, Elemental Fairy's Ultimate Filth. Saul asks what to do to get the second potion. Kongsha contemplates the task. Kongsha reveals she needs the brain of a first or preferably second rank apprentice. Kongsha orders Saul to collect brains monthly, threatening to withhold potion. Kongsha warns Saul to meet the quota or lose access to the second potion. Saul pries open the vial cautiously to inspect the clear bubbling potion inside. Saul sniffs the potion gently gently, detecting a faint metallic scent without disgust. Saul meditates and feels his magic increase slightly after exposure to the potion. He opens his eyes, astonished at the potion's clear boost to his meditation ability. Saul debates the potion's great power against its deadly 3-year cost to his life. He decides not to drink but keep the vial to study and promise to Kongsha. At class, Saul and Kelly share tired looks but keep silent, understanding each other. Kelly reveals her pressure to grow faster after a painful incident with the Mutual Aid Society. Kelly explains how a parasite from the Mutual Aid Society once took hold of her secretly. In the corner, members of the Mutual Aid Society chat, unbothered and unaware of danger. Saul quietly watches their uneasy group, noting Duke's cold attitude and Rocky's dazzled eyes. Kelly notes their strange behavior vanished but warns the Mutual Aid Society persists underground. Saul reassures Kelly, but she doubts even Senior Byron wants to confront the group. Kelly admits Jenna keeps inviting her to meetings but she resists, fearing the risks. Saul advises caution and suggests finding Senior Byron to deter the society's threats. Saul explains Senior Byron faces restriction as second-rank apprentices are expelled at 30. Kelly reacts shocked, realizing older second ranks were likely expelled by the tower. Saul dreams silently of leaving the tower, having never seen the sun outside its walls. Kelly explains the world outside is chaotic and full of ongoing wars. Saul asks if outside the tower is still chaotic, showing his curiosity. Kelly describes the violent power struggles among wizard factions outside the tower. Saul wonders if the outside world is as strange as the tower itself. Saul asks about the tower's reputation among people outside its walls. Kelly reveals the tower is feared and relied upon by nobles and seen as demonic by commoners. Kelly explains her noble background and how her family secured power through wizardry. Saul asks if others in Kelly's family also have wizard aptitude. Kelly says she has 2 older brothers sent to other factions with less talent. Kelly declares her urgency to become 3rd rank before 30, rejecting noble weakness. Saul thinks about the rarity of 3rd rank apprentices inside the tower. Kelly admits 3rd ranks are rarely seen, always traveling or researching. Saul's thoughts wander between hope and fear about surviving to 30. He leaves Kelly on the 6th floor and continues alone toward his destination. Ascending further, Saul notices the candlelight dim and foul stench in the air. He unlocks and enters the corpse chamber, seeking comfort despite the danger. He reflects on his frail body and the risky path of magical body modification. Saul begins preparing his first experiment using the riskier nasal cavity approach. The floating book repeatedly warns Saul of death as he defies safety again and again. Saul debates ignoring the book's death alerts while pushing his dangerous experiments. Saul sees the book show only death for all materials he tests. Saul dumps the cauldron's contents into the corpse bin, watching the reaction. The concoction reacts chemically with corpses as Saul hurriedly slams the lid. Saul sighs and admits his wizardry knowledge is too weak for success now. Contemplates changing his potion, making direction after repeated failures. He studies old notes cataloging deadly causes to reverse engineer effects. A candle sparks to life, breaking Saul's focus but signaling a new delivery. A 1st-rank apprentice corpse arrives, eyes wide and frozen in terror. Saul notes the body is incomplete and stores the harvested organs carefully. He reluctantly places the rest of the body into the corpse bin for disposal. At day's end, Saul nervously prepares to smuggle the wrapped box from the morgue. He cautiously peeks to avoid meeting anyone while sneaking out late at night. Spots a large blind man leaning against the wall and freezes in fear. The blind man moves slowly, walking straight toward Saul's position. Pressed against the cold wall, Saul debates returning the box to avoid trouble. Blind man bypasses Saul, quietly carrying the corpse bin down the hall. Saul waits silently until footsteps fade, then bolts with the precious box. His balance falters as Saul senses something strange growing on his head. He looks at the book but gets no response about the strange growth. With anger, Saul bows sharply toward the wall, provoking the unseen culprit. Something slimy hits the wall and drips down Saul's forehead, startling him. Saul, covered in slime, climbs while clutching the precious box tightly. He realizes the stinging pain on his forehead is from bowing too hard earlier. Saul decides he must deliver the box to Kongsha before taking a shower. He passes through the corridor of the West Tower, climbing the sloped ramp upwards. Apprentices whisper and stare, but Saul ignores them as he climbs higher. Beyond the 1st-rank floors, silence falls as he passes the 10th floor halls. He recalls his time as a servant cleaning these halls, haunted by past sights. A sudden sound ahead pulls Saul back to focus as he walks toward the shadowed bend. Sid emerges at the bend with a cold smile as he blocks Saul's path unexpectedly. Sid mocks Saul's value, but Saul answers respectfully, hiding his fear well. Sid sneers and leaves, unwilling to attack Saul despite his harsh words. Saul thinks Sid's true target is the book, not him, deepening the mystery. He feels weaker but knows Sid's next move will come soon, raising tension. He suspects Kaz's protection is conditional and that replacement looms near. Clutching the box tighter, he quickens pace to find Kongsha before dark. Saul arrives at Kongsha's door and is yanked inside, stumbling to the floor. Kongsha demands to know why Saul came straight here in such a disheveled state. Saul explains, urgently arriving with the severed head from the morgue. Kongsha calms slightly, knowing the severed head belongs to a first-rank apprentice. Kongsha warns Saul he will die if he tries to threaten her with it. Saul admits he came here without plans to threaten Kongsha, fearing for his safety. Kongsha orders Saul to wash up in the bathroom before discussing further. Kongsha boldly enters the bathroom and sits near Saul, breaking norms plainly. Saul awkwardly informs Kongsha that he is bathing, feeling exposed. Kongsha reassures Saul by saying she has seen worse than his body. Kongsha probes Saul about Sid threatening his future in the morgue. Saul fears losing his job if Sid's newcomers impress mentor Kazmore. Kongsha promises to handle Sid and tells Saul to focus on tasks. Kongsha suddenly leans close, head glass dome touching Saul's forehead. Saul feels strange warmth and biting chill pressing his forehead. Kongsha mocks Saul's fear and warns him against provoking her further. Kongsha bans Saul from visiting before midnight to avoid exposure. Saul emerges soaked and disheveled after bathing, feeling resolved. Saul passes by the mutual aid group as they discuss his strange past. Duke mocks Saul, claiming he cheated to pass the apprentice test. Doze recalls Sid's resistance to Saul passing but notes Senior Nick's leniency. Jenna asks if Saul's magical aptitude truly was as poor as rumored. Duke complains Saul's aptitude was awful, but Kaz still took him. Duke doubts Saul will pass the test, mocking his poor magic skills. Saul visits Kelly to ask about new apprentices with dark magic affinity. Kelly mocks Saul's curiosity and offers to check on new apprentices. Kelly slams her door on Duke, who reels from the blow and fury. Kelly is favored by mentors but chooses to be close only to Saul. Saul wakes suddenly at 3:30 a.m., alert and focused after restless sleep. Saul dresses quickly and prepares his phantom sound eye for the night task. Brown pushes a cart nervously in the tower corridor, feeling cold and uneasy. Brown feels resentment after being forced to return to dangerous night cleaning duties. Brown clutches a magical scented bead, hoping it protects him from spectral dangers. Brown regrets his fate and wishes he had chosen to return to farming life instead. Cart's wheels jam in a crack. Brown crouches to examine the obstruction. Ghastly pale feet appear around Brown, a horrific mirrored pattern of limbs. Brown shudders and raises the scented bead over his head, praying for protection. The bead's glow does nothing. Fear climbs as Brown realizes the horror's return. Brown trembles, recalling a similar horror from his childhood village attack. Barbarians had split villagers and animals, hanging them midair on stakes. Brown stands alone in the silent tower corridor, dread and memories overwhelming. Brown relives the barbarian sacrificial rite, trapped in mud with his sister. Brown clutches a scent bead tightly, trying to block horrible memories and fear. A familiar gentle voice whispers. Brown dares to look as his sister appears alive. Brown shivers. His sister gently asks what frightens him in silence and mud. Brown tries to retreat, but his frozen limbs trap him near his sister in the mud. Wizard apprentices arrive by carriage, forcing barbarians to flee in panic. One apprentice flies after barbarians, striking them down with thunder and fire. Brown and sister crawl from mud, thanking the wizard who saved them from death. Wizards decide only one can ride the carriage. Brown hopes to become an apprentice. Brown silently pleads with his sister to say, "Leave me, take me with you instead." Suddenly, a rock strikes his sister's head. She falls, clutching a bleeding wound. Brown stares in shock, then calms with cold clarity as anger ignites inside him. Brown proclaims he is the only one left and wishes to join as apprentice. Left to climb into the crowded children's wagon alone, Brown's face turns pale. Memories surge. Brown believes the sister's image is just just a cruel illusion. Sid appears, catching Brown's fist and coldly watching the test's outcome. Brown grins and asks Sid if he has passed the test, hopeful and defiant. Sid releases Brown's fist, asking why Saul must be eliminated. Brown rushes to speculate why Sid cannot kill Saul himself. Brown recalls Sid's cryptic message about the need for Saul. Sid tests Brown's cleverness, asking if he wishes to see wizard power. Brown lowers his gaze and his body suddenly bursts into flames. Saul arrives silently and strikes Brown with a powerful bone fist. Brown's body smokes and burns, while Saul examines a floating book nearby. Saul pulls a small wax bead from Brown's body, inspecting its scent carefully. Saul tosses the wax bead into the fire, burning deadly beetles inside. Saul feels no remorse killing Brown, who was never entirely human. Servants scramble to clean the charred corpse blocking the tower corridor. Sid steps past servants and smells corpse, wrapping wax on the dead Brown. Sid feels insulted that Saul dared to defy him with a smile. Saul greets Sid cheerfully before disappearing down the dark corridor. Days later, Saul studies his notes in a quiet morgue lab room. Only Kelly suspects Saul's rapid spell mastery causing her dark circles. Saul prepares to begin learning his fourth zero-tier spell today. Saul's method of memorizing coordinates keeps him ahead in spell learning. Most apprentices learn one spell at a time. Saul defies this norm. Saul picks Strike Undead, a spell effective against ghosts, to study. Saul receives a skeleton guest, noting it is suspiciously clean and bare. Aiden passes this bare skeleton to Saul, confirming it lacked flesh before. Saul studies the corpse's strange reaction to his chaos concoction. The skeleton dissolves entirely, leaving the sturdy morgue box unharmed. Pulls out a gray pebble from the box that has elastic, fireproof properties. Saul records that the pebble resists acid, fire, water, and blade scratches. In class, Kelly angrily tells Saul that a new apprentice he asked about is dead. Kelly warns Saul to forget pride and play the underclass until second rank status. Saul reflects silently on the death and his own morally gray choices. He recalls the dead apprentice's remains led to crafting the plastic bone armor. His experimental materials are nearly spent and money is running low. Saul knows normal income won't fund his rare wizard body experiments well. Can't sell the phantom sound eye or plastic bone yet, too vital. He decides to sell his coordinate method to trustworthy, well-off apprentices. He considers Kelly but worries about credit points and prior conflicts. Saul spots Senior Byron as ideal buyer, rich, strong, free of conflicts. Saul nearly misses Mark exiting his room, who greets him with surprise. Saul stops Mark, asking about ways to earn more credits. Mark invites Saul in and discusses credit difficulties openly. Mark explains the Mutual Aid Society is exploitative but offers trade meets. Saul hesitates about risky trade meets and anonymous buyers. Mark reassures Saul that trade meet secrets are generally kept safe. Saul offers to help if Mark needs anything, sensing opportunity. Saul leaves Mark's room and heads back to the second floor East Tower. Saul plans to send Byron a note to meet when no one is around. 2 days pass with no reply. Saul worries that Byron may have left. Saul doubts his research progress and considers risky morgue theft instead. Suddenly, a knock surprises Saul. Someone unknown waits behind the door. Saul meets the cold senior, who demands his immediate assistance. He enters a strange morgue filled with standing corpses and arcane runes. The senior explains a wraith is jumping among the corpses, risking materials. Saul admits he lacks means to fight the wraith, but offers to track it. She instructs Saul to wear the mask and sit in the magic circle to see the wraith. She offers a whole corpse in exchange for his help, promising concealment. Saul questions why she came to him instead of Senior Hayden. Saul faces pressure to quickly examine 3 corpses in a tense room. The mocking book reveals the wraith has moved onto Saul without warning. Peggy grows impatient and orders Saul onto the magic circle at once. Saul hesitates and suggests one corpse might not be enough for his experiment. The book forbids sabotage. Saul stalls while Peggy grows agitated. Peggy threatens Saul to stop dawdling and throws crystals to push him forward. Saul accepts the pouch, obeys, and steps into the magic circle with mask in hand. Peggy commands Saul to put on the mask, her killing intent now visible. Saul coats the mask with a foul potion and dons it despite the stench. Peggy steps fully into the candle circle, removing her robe to reveal nightgown. Peggy lights candles and begins silent chanting. Runes animate on walls and floor. Saul sits still inside the magic circle, eyes fixed on the 3 corpses nearby. The candle flames stretch unnaturally, flickering like living beings in agony. Runes on floor writhe and reform into dancing stick figures near Saul silently. Peggy snaps at Saul to report the wraith's exact location instantly. Saul coldly reveals the wraith has possessed Peggy herself, shocking her. Grotesque black spirit snarls, lunging at Saul as Peggy screams in agony. Saul removes the mask, gagging at the unbearable stench it now emits. The book praises the mask's unique filthy power, warning about the foul stench. Saul wants to ignore the floating book and focuses on internal conflict. Saul perceives the struggle between Peggy and the wraith for body control. Saul plans to escalate conflict to prevent alliance between Peggy and the wraith. Peggy's eye turns completely black, warning Saul the wraith's control grows. Peggy screams as Saul commands to force the wraith out urgently. Peggy's eyes both turn black. She screams in pain, unable to fight effectively. Peggy demands the mask. Saul throws it to her swiftly to regain control. Peggy catches a larger piece of leather, wondering if it's really her skin. Peggy slaps the leather to her face. The wraith shrieks, diving deeper inside. Peggy screams as the leather binds her, trapping the wraith inside her head. Saul pins Peggy for minutes, stopping her struggling as the wraith weakens. Saul chants and casts Strike Undead spell at Peggy after holding her down. Peggy twitches from Strike but remains alive. Saul repeats Strike Undead spell. Saul breathes heavily, exhausted but keeps hold of the pale yellow leather mask. Senior Byron appears suddenly, coming through the doorway surprised to see Saul. Byron pulls Saul aside, muttering strange words and pointing at Peggy on the floor. Peggy lunges at Byron but is struck down by a black thread of energy from his fingertip. Peggy's body rapidly decays midair, then crashes to the floor as the wraith's threat ends. Byron's wounds heal quickly while Saul inspects the mask after the fight. Byron explains his delay and hints at promotion while talking with Saul. Saul shares his involvement. Byron praises Saul's skill despite risk. Byron mourns Peggy's death, revealing he had recruited her. Byron admits lack of friendship yet acknowledges a debt to Saul. Saul questions Byron about the compound runes coordinate diagram. Byron explains the locator and advises Saul about ranking and knowledge. Byron invites Saul to join his squad after reaching second rank. Byron explains the danger second and third rank apprentices face outside the tower. Byron sighs and explains resource limits inside the tower to Saul. Byron checks Peggy's table and the 3 stone coffins in the room. Byron reveals a wraith hides within Peggy's 3 corpses. Byron criticizes Peggy's greed and underestimating the wraith. Byron praises Saul's skill after killing Peggy with clever tactics. Byron offers to handle Peggy's belongings. Saul agrees cautiously. Byron forcefully kicks Hayden's door, enforcing consequences for absence. Hayden admits skipping work as Byron deposits a coffin inside. Byron carries the last coffin and explains the corpse division with Saul. Byron offers Saul a deal to trade Peggy's corpse for future help. Saul smiles satisfied, seeing Byron as a possible ally against Sid. Saul questions Byron about Sid and Peggy's possible intentions. Byron leaves Saul alone to deal with Peggy's corpse and tasks. Saul contemplates Sid's ongoing threat and the hardback book's power. Saul reflects that Sid does not fully understand the book's deadly power. Flames snap Saul out of thought as he checks his ongoing alchemical reaction. Saul prepares to greet his first guest, hope renewed after hard trials. Saul works late, preparing plastic bones that soften with electric shocks. He pours thick residue into a bottle, the last step before modification. Saul hesitates, fearing change but knowing he must begin the modification. He looks at the flickering candle on the platform, day's work done. Saul debates sending the second-rank apprentice's brain to Kongsha. He slaps himself to shake off fear and return to urgent work. Pours softened plastic bones onto a tray, ready to fuse them. He removes his shirt, exposing white bones on his left hand for surgery. Saul mixes fusion liquid as softened bones collapse like wet clay. He drinks vials and takes a potion that boosts elemental absorption. Saul applies softened plastic, bleeding but shaping a prosthetic hand. The prosthetic takes form, a size larger but fitting with his arm. He plunges his left forearm into steamy liquid, pain overwhelming. Pain grips Saul's body, but the floating book shows calm reassurance. He pulls himself up, sweat, soaked and feeling deadly pain spreading. He gazes at the book, steadying himself before taking the final potion. Saul prepares to use a heart from the second-rank apprentice's boss's corpse. Extracts drops of a rare potion called Heart's Guardian to survive. Energy floods through his body, easing the pain in his left hand slowly. Dizziness hits him, but it's a blissful, almost floating feeling this time. He laughs softly and lets the dizzy spell wash over him, lying content. He imagines dancing with the spinning ceiling, reaching his hands up to it. Suddenly, a loud bang breaks his trance as the crimson door bursts open. Multicolored bubbles flood inside as a strange, distorted figure enters the room. He struggles to recognize the visitor and tries to greet him but lacks strength. Visitor's voice distorts and fades as Saul's world shimmers and breaks apart. His perception fractures into bubbles, body parts floating separately in midair. He refuses to shut his eyes, determined to anchor himself and escape the illusion. His eyes spot the floating book near his left shoulder, his anchor to reality. As he sees the book's title, his body snaps back to its correct form swiftly. He pushes himself up, eyes on Senior Byron, who watches him worriedly nearby. Byron shows Saul a black crystal ball to measure his magical power level. The orb shows 11 jowls, more than double his previous magic power level. Byron asks Saul if he would sell his amazing body modification formula. Saul smiles quietly, savoring his progress and the power he has gained so far. His magic power grows steadily, pushing him beyond the expectations of mentors. Saul freezes, considering how much to sell his formula without taking a loss. Byron tries to buy the body modification cheaply, but feels ashamed of the offer. Saul refuses, explaining the formula likely only works for his unique situation. Byron learns the diary acts as a locator anchoring Saul's spirit to reality. Byron accepts the uniqueness and offers to help Saul check his physical condition. Saul's magic power reaches 11 jowls and may rise to 13 after full stabilization. Byron warns Saul to hold on to his consciousness to avoid losing himself. Saul reviews his past life to ensure his identity remains intact after change. Byron explains the locator concept, a vital element for advanced wizards. Byron warns Saul to keep his locator secret until he becomes a true wizard. Byron demonstrates testing left hand's special abilities, showing skilled expertise. Byron's wounds start healing rapidly from his powerful body modification. Byron ignores Saul's offer to escort him and leaves the tower alone, swaying. Saul checks the time. It's early evening but feels like 10 days passed. He smiles gratefully, feeling the thrill and wonder of his modification's progress. Jenna clutches her collar in fear, haunted by the curse she now carries. Jenna believes the Mutual Aid Society cursed the newbies like her and others. She doubts anyone can help her break free, as she is just a powerless newbie. She wonders if Kelly suspected this earlier when she avoided the society.